Thank you. We started.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our October Cabinet meeting. It's nice to see you all here today. Thank you for joining. We'll move straight away then to the first item on our agenda. Apologies.
Councillor Rahman, Leader.
Item number 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest?
No.
Okay, that takes us on to item 3, which are the minutes from our September Cabinet meeting, and these are available on pages 3 to 12 of the pack that you've got before you, colleagues. Has everybody had an opportunity to look at the minutes, and is somebody content to move them as a true record?
Move those, Leader.
Yeah. Okay, thanks very much. We move then to the first substantive item on our agenda today, which is to receive the corporate annual report for 2020-21, and this is available on pages 13 to 66 of the packs that we've received for this meeting. And I have to say, colleagues, that actually this was a very welcome report indeed this year. It's our 4th annual report of our 5-year corporate plan, and the purpose of the report itself is to reflect on 2020 and to 21, assessing the achievements that this council has made, also considering where we can improve, and looking forward to the remainder of the corporate plan. 2020 to 21 has been one of the most challenging years that this cabinet and officers across the council have had to manage as we've responded to the COVID-19 pandemic and supported Newport's communities. Despite these challenges, Newport's communities have come together to support our public services, reaching out to their neighbours and helping our local businesses to recover and thrive again. The report provides an overview of what Newport Council and its partners have delivered against this Cabinet's mission of improving people's lives and the 4 wellbeing objectives that we set, which are to improve skills, educational outcomes and employment opportunities, promote economic growth and regeneration whilst protecting the environment, to enable people to be healthy, independent and resilient, and to build cohesive and sustainable communities. Now, throughout the pandemic, as we're all painfully aware, many council services were impacted by the restrictions, and we committed ourselves to 4 strategic recovery aims to support the response and recovery of services and support Newport's communities and businesses. And those really important commitments that we made in terms of the strategic recovery aims were to understand and respond to the additional challenges which COVID-19 has presented, including the loss of employment, impact on businesses and on progress, achievement and well-being of both our mainstream and our vulnerable learners. We also committed in our recovery aims to understand and respond to the impact of COVID-19 on the city's economic and environmental goals to enable Newport to thrive again, to promote and protect the health and well-being of people, safeguarding our most vulnerable and building strong, resilient communities. Our 4th strategic aim was to provide people with the resources and the support they need to move out of the crisis, considering in particular the impact that COVID-19 has had on our minority and marginalised communities. Now, the annual report was presented in September to the Council's Overview and Management Scrutiny Committee. We welcomed their detailed discussions on the Council's COVID-19 response and their feedback on the contents of the annual report. The committee's recommendations have been considered and updated in the final version of this report presented here today. Following the Cabinet's endorsement, the annual report will be published and will also be made available in Welsh. In the last year, Newport Council has had to adapt and deliver its services and have had to change long established habits and practices to meet the very urgent needs of services switched incredibly quickly wherever possible to remote ways of working, video calls and wearing protective clothing to minimise the spread of the virus. From the start of the pandemic, this council's priority was to protect the most vulnerable across our communities. This could not have been achieved without the collaborative approach that Newport Council, public and third sector organisations took to achieve this. And I hope one of the legacies of this experience is actually to sustain that positive working relationship into the future. The annual report demonstrates the council has continued to make good progress against its wellbeing objectives, despite the challenge faced and increasing continuing financial pressures faced by the council's frontline services. The council's finance position was in a good position at the end of 2020-21, which was helped by the Welsh Government funding to support the council's response to the pandemic. But we are all fully aware in this cabinet that we are seeing new financial challenges as our services are seeing increasing demand, and it will require us to make difficult and bold decisions going forward. The report also highlights some of the areas in the council that will require improvement and where the council will make necessary changes in the delivery of its services. And I think at this stage, colleagues, I'll just pause and invite any comments on the report itself. Councillor Cochrane.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I think in all the years I've been on the authority, I think this is the most positive corporate plan I've ever come across, to be perfectly honest. And I can just highlight just a few things really. Home First, where a lot of residents would have been well, they would have been placed on wards, and I think Councillor Davis would be aware of this. Everyone that was going into casualty then was going into the wards. Now there's at least 31 a week now in Home First are being discharged back to home with a package. Now that saving alone is about £3.2 million. Now, yes, there's a cost of running Home First, but having said that, if you take the £1.7 million of the cost of the services, we're still gaining £1.5 million that's between health and social services, and what's better for the people as well. They're not being engaged in the hospital environment. So that's just one thing, and I just think the community connectors, you know, to over 2,000 residents have been engaged in their services, and that's been a terrific help for a lot of people. iPads in care homes, you know, who would have thought that during this pandemic, you know, to do that. And you know, there's a lot in the report that's not even mentioned. You know, I think that we could even add to, you know, residential homes. Fostering care has moved up at a great speed. So all I can say, Leader, you know, I think you've articulated extremely well, but I say this is a really good corporate plan, and I'm pleased just to be part of that plan, to be honest, and all hats off to everybody engaged in it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Cochrane, and I certainly support your comments there. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Leader. I want to make specific focus, look specifically at wellbeing objective 1 to improve skills and education employment opportunity, specifically in relation to the strategic recovery and the work that's been undertaken. It's been particularly challenging for schools with home learning and pupils and families being confined to home to continue learning in those instances. And remote learning has been a specific challenge, which as a local authority, we've been able to support and enable. Using Welsh Government funding with the Hub EdTech programme, we've actually been able to provide 6,735 devices. These were Chromebooks, laptops and Apple tablets, which were delivered to schools and then were sent to children's homes. Additionally, families were given, there was who didn't have internet because they couldn't afford it. 1,300 MiFi units were purchased and carriage charges were funded during this period to ensure that education could continue on at home. An incredibly challenging time. Consequently, as that challenge we have to focus on has been the impact on the emotional well-being of our students. And consequently, one initiative that's been delivered, it's been a Gwent whole school based approach. However, we've actually seen that impact in Newport, and a pilot strand is where Newport's Llanwern cluster received an in-depth report that focused on the emotional well-being needs of school communities, working alongside schools and partners to meet these needs. And there's been also post-COVID-19 recovery work and 2-day training events that's been undertaken for all our staff to help them as much as the students to actually to come to terms with what's happened. You know, we've got to talk about PTSD now, and that the vulnerability of our students and our staff. We're not out of the pandemic yet, and they're still suffering from the consequences. I also want to focus on what's happening within the Skills and Work programme, because importantly, as our NEETs who've suffered and struggled. However, what I'd like to say is that our hubs were able to continue to deliver on employability programmes during this time. Much of that was funded by the EU Social Fund. And I'm really pleased that that's been continued with a kickstart, which was launched in this year, a Welsh Government funded scheme, which was specifically focused on our 16 to 24-year-olds who are currently claiming universal credit and risk of becoming long-term employed. And I'm really proud to say that Newport City Council, as an employer, has participated in this programme and currently offering 30 job opportunities, 20 of which are currently filled, to enable these young people to progress and go on to long-term employment. They'll be giving specific skills and training. Our youth Academy has been particularly excellent during this time, and in the last year have provided 111 different placements for the age group of 16 to 18-year-old who are equally at risk of becoming NEET. And within those hubs, they've been offered a bespoke training programme enabling each individual not just to be made ready for work, but to learn to engage and become involved within the system, so they don't feel divorced or disengaged. There's been a real focus on engagement, and it's really, really good to hear that 85 of those young people are actually going on to sustained employment as a consequence of that programme. And that's despite the pandemic. I think it's absolutely excellent. And we talk about diversity as well, and we've got the REACH Restart programme that's continued to deliver across Newport, irrespective of the pandemic, and that's to reach out and support our families who have ethnic minority who have difficulty with the English language, and that's to deliver on ESOL programmes. And it's a bespoke, additionally, a holistic programme, which I'm delighted we've just reduced an additionality of £56,000 of funding from Welsh Government to support that programme. And it's a holistic programme that doesn't just focus on ESOL, learning English as a second language, but focuses on confidence building and personal development, teamwork, time management, lifestyle, learning how to childcare availability. So those issues that people who come into this country have got to learn that support with, and it's very much there in Newport despite the pandemic. And I think these are excellent things to report back on that we've achieved in the last year. Thank you, Lita.
Thanks very much for that, Councillor Davis, and I think it's really important there to highlight the outstanding work of the Education Service during the pandemic and the commitment across that service, and not just the local authority service but our schools as well, to the well-being of our learners. So thank you very much for that contribution there. Councillor Truman.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I fully concur with Councillor Cochrane when he mentioned it's the most positive annual report he's ever seen. Well, I've been here a long time, same as Paul, and I have never seen such a positive one delivered against the background of a pandemic. And just think about this. There was no template for any of us, all the officers. There was nothing at all. We had to do it. Everybody pulled together, because if they hadn't pulled together, we wouldn't have been able to achieve what we've achieved. And as I say, we're not out of the woods yet, but I just picked out a couple of the things from my portfolio that I'd mention. Well, we had to set up a track and trace system very, very quickly. Again, no template. We had to do it, and we did it. And it turned out to be, and it still is, one of the best in Wales. And that's not me saying it. That's the inspector saying it. So is that the mobile testing units? Everyone is pulled together. You could go on about the hubs. You could go on about the temporary rough sleepers. We got into temporary accommodation. There's a list is endless, isn't it? And I'm not going to go on all day about it, but it's all there for us to see. It's all evidence-based. It's not something that's been dreamt up overnight. It's there to see clearly. And as I say, and the public works and the enforcement, giving advice to businesses, guidance, and where necessary, enforcement. And the amount of money has been given out to the authority at short notice again by the Treasury and all the officers and everyone else involved in that. That was given out. And as I say, if we want to pat ourselves on the back, we're not out of the woods yet. I think it's a time to do it. So the whole of Newport has stepped up to the plate on this. All of us have stepped up to the plate. We're not out of the woods yet, and we've got some difficult periods to go through, but we'll get through them. As you say, if we listen, look at the advice, be sensible, have common sense, we'll get out of it. And that is the question. So as I say, at the end of the day, a fantastic report that we haven't as councillors, and all we get criticised, and rightly so sometimes. We can't on this one, because this has been a joint thing with all the officers, all the employees of Newport have pulled together to do what we got in front of us. So a massive thank you to all the staff. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Truman. And you are absolutely right. This is the product of collaboration and co-production, working closely together to achieve the outcomes we've achieved during this period. So you're absolutely right there. And I think the example of TTP that we've set up here in Gwent will be an exemplar that will be held up across the whole of the UK in future years. I'm absolutely certain about that. So thank you for your comments, and thank you as well to all the officers that have contributed to the performance over the past year. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Leader. As you'd expect, I'll focus a little bit on the work throughout the report pertaining to the environment. And I just want to again sort of pick up on the passion and dedication of our officers in meeting the challenges of sustainability in the environment in Newport as we push towards that net zero carbon neutral target by 2030. And if I could highlight some of the achievements, and as my colleagues have said, there could be many, many more. We've made significant inroads in changing our LED lighting in the city to low energy, and also we've been the first in Wales to introduce the electric refuse lorries as well, which are only part of the wider picture. I'd also like to sort of point out I think which is mentioned in the report, the award of the prestigious Alan Clark Award for local community energy in recognition of the work that's being done in the solar area in installing over 7,000 panels. I think that's just worth highlighting, really, and the success really of various biodiversity projects to improve the city's environment for all the people that live in the city. So I just needed to point out a few of those highlights maybe from my sort of area. Thank you.
That is great. Thank you very much for that, Councillor Hughes, and I think that's really important, isn't it, going forward, that we continue to build on that excellent performance. It is really good to hear that. So thank you for your contribution. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Leader. Obviously, I'm going to highlight the fact that we've had continuous regeneration of the city through support and delivery of schemes such as the Chartist Hotel, Indoor Market, Market Arcade, Mill Street Post Office Building, obviously the Transporter Bridge, which I keep telling people is mine, and now the information station. There's a lot in this report that I am extremely proud of. As previous speakers have said, this cabinet has worked solidly. Our staff have worked really, really hard on this. As my colleague Councillor Truman has just said, there was no blueprint. We didn't know what was around the corner, and to be fair to yourself, Leader, and to the Deputy Leader, we really have pulled it out the bag, and I'm incredibly proud of the senior team of this council and yourself and the Deputy. brilliant.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. And I think reflecting on your comments there, what that does highlight is the tremendous sense of collaboration and teamwork across the authority, doesn't it? And we've really proven during this period how important it is that we all work together. Deputy Leader.
Yes, thank you, Leader. You've just mentioned about the teamwork within the staff of the Civic Centre, and that's apparent as we've pulled this report together. Probably one of the best reports I've seen, so well done to all. But I'd like to touch on perhaps extending that thanks to residents, especially in a wellbeing objective too, with introduction of smaller refuse bins, and hey-oh, the recycling rates are for the best city in the country. And I'm glad that Councillor Harvey pulled on the old Mill Street Post Office building, which is looking very nice and soon to be accessed by our new Devon Place footbridge, which leads me on again through that to link the northern side of the city with the active travel schemes that we've got, that have increased by over 47% in a year. So well done to all, and well done to the residents. Thank you all.
Thank you very much for that, Deputy Leader. Councillor Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. What everyone else has already said. What I'd just like to highlight is the, if you look through not just this report, but all of today's cabinet, the amount of time that the neighbourhood hubs and other hubs that we've got, intelligence hub, are mentioned, and the good work that's been carried on there, and how they've really come of age in the most challenging period that we've ever had in the history of Newport, possibly, well, certainly since the Second World War. What I do like in this report, and I do like in all reports, is to get away from sometimes the dryness of the report, and that's on page 33. It's actually got the job success from our neighbourhood hubs, which actually shows what has happened. It's a case study, and we should have more case studies, because they say more than any of the percentages and any of the things. That on page 33 about participant A working in law and manufacturing and etc., and participant B working as a student job, and the effect that they've had. I know that my colleague Deb has already spoken a little bit about this. I think this is a marvellous report, and the hubs now are at the centre of everything they do, because they are bringing all that we have closer to the public, and that's really, really one of the highlights of this report for me. Thank you, Leader.
Thanks very much for that, Councillor Mayor. And colleagues, can I thank you all for your contributions there. I think that, as you say, the report is a really good example of the work that's been done over the course of the year. And I mean, we've helped hundreds and hundreds, well, over 1,000 businesses across the city, supporting them with financial support and rate relief support. But also, and I think it's really important to note this at this time, certainly as we're in Black History Month as well, I'd really like to highlight the work that the teams across the authority have done in terms of supporting people who may be quite vulnerable due to perhaps just having arrived in the city and needing additional support. We've got a long history here in Newport of offering welcome and sanctuary to people who choose to make this city their home. And we're really proud of our diverse communities. And some of our diverse communities here have been so terribly affected by the pandemic. I'd really like to express my thanks to all of our supports and all of the volunteers in the voluntary groups that have helped support some of our more vulnerable citizens during this period. In terms of the report itself, I think overall what the report does demonstrate incredibly strongly is the excellent progress that we've been making towards achieving the objectives of the corporate plan. And I look forward to the final report on this as we reach the end of the 5-year period. next year. So colleagues, thank you all very much for your considered comments on the report itself, and it's just left to me to ask you, are you content to endorse this report for publication?
Yes, move that, Leader.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much for that. We move now then, colleagues, to the next item on our agenda today, which is the replacement local development plan. And this is a hugely significant item. The report on this is on pages 67 to 94 of your packs. And you will recall that earlier this year, full council endorsed the review of Newport's local development plan. Now, our process for review has also received formal approval from Welsh Government, and we've put a call out for candidate sites. We've also consulted on an integrated sustainability appraisal scoping report. This report will help to ensure that sustainability is at the heart of the replacement LDP. It will include assessments on equality, language, health and well-being, and will be key to assessing the candidate sites and all proposed replacement LDP policies. The proposed integrated sustainability appraisal scoping report includes a framework which focuses on 10 themes. The themes are economy and employment, population and communities, health and well-being, equality, diversity and inclusion, transport and movement, natural resources, biodiversity, historic environment, landscape, and of critical importance, climate change. Proposed sites and draft policies will all need to be considered against these themes. The themes have a number of assessment questions associated with them, and these can be viewed in Appendix A of the Cabinet report. In summary, sites and policies which have positive answers to these assessment questions will have a greater chance of making it into the adopted replacement LDP. The Integrated Sustainability Appraisal Scoping Report and Framework has been subject to public consultation. Comments received can be viewed in Appendix B, along with the changes that have been made following that consultation. And you'll recall, colleagues, we did have an opportunity to discuss some of those responses previously. Issues covered in the responses include the importance of green infrastructure, Welsh Government's declaration of a nature emergency, investment in the city centre and further protection of the grant levels. In summary, Cabinet are being asked to consider the responses received and approve the Integrated Sustainability Appraisal Scoping Report and Framework, which have been updated following the consultation. If we approve this, colleagues, we are also being asked to agree that officers can move to the next stage of the replacement LDP preparation. This involves engaging with stakeholders in order to prepare a draft vision and proposed objectives for the replacement LDP, plus discussing the level of growth, particularly in terms of housing and employment land that we may wish to deliver in Newport. All proposals and feedback on this next engagement stage will be returned to us as a Cabinet for further discussion and consideration in the future. And so, colleagues, would anybody like to comment on the report? Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Leader. I'd just like to reiterate what you said, really, in relation to the report. If I could pick up on comments made by our partners and stakeholders in the consultation into the report, especially our own Council Connected Communities Manager, the NRW, and issues raised by friends of the Gwent Levels, amongst many, many others, which for me give a substance and a sort of an increased depth, really, to the report, and highlights really the amount of partnership work that's going on within the council. I welcome certainly sort of section 8 and 9 especially, which focus on our need to protect rural landscapes and take conservation into account, especially in the planning context. And I'm glad that the work being done is actually being recognised more nationally. Only recently, having been picked up by the BBC research team, that Newport is ahead of the game in several important areas. So I just thought it was important to highlight those, if that's all right.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Hughes. Would anybody else like to comment on this particular item? Oh, Councillor Davis, sorry.
My apology, I couldn't get the hand to work. I do apologise, Leader. I think it's essentially to support Councillor Hughes's comments in relation to the Gwent levels. You know, you look at section 4, you look at section 7, and both of them, there's focus on there on the protection of our Gwent levels for its biodiversity, the protection of the bird life, and I think it's fundamental to the LDP that this is recognised for our future generations. It's not just a site that we need to invest in for future diversity. It's a site that is there for future well-being and health well-being of our residents. You know, section 4 talks about hubs of biodiversity, and essentially that's routes to travel to, and that really needs to be taken into consideration. I'm delighted that the LDP, there's already recommendations to take that into consideration at a future point. So thank you, Leader. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Councillor Davis. Any further comments on this particular item? No? So colleagues, then, are you content to note and consider the consultation comments received on the ISA report along with the proposed officer responses, to approve the ISA framework and the ISA report, and to agree that officers can start engaging with stakeholders in order to prepare a draft vision and objectives for Newport plus growth options for the plan period?
So moved, Leader.
Yep.
Happy with that, Leader.
Okay, that's great. Thank you all for your continued support for this process. Thanks. We'll move on to item number 6 on our agenda then, which is our Strategic Equality Plan Annual Report for 2019-20, and this is on pages 95 to 132 of the packs that we have before us today. Now, under the Equality Act 2010, the Council is required to report annually on the progress it has made against strategic equality objectives contained in the Strategic Equality Plan. The Equality Act also requires local authority to publish staff equalities data, which this report also contains. This annual report relates to the first year of delivery against the Council's new strategic equality objectives that were published on March the 31st, 2020. The new objectives were developed in partnership with key internal and external stakeholders and were subject to extensive community engagement. The involvement of grassroots communities ensures that whilst our plan delivers a strategic vision for equality in Newport, it also ensures tangible outcomes for communities on the ground. The pandemic has presented significant challenges in delivering against some areas of work, for example, in relation to customer services. However, other areas have gained traction as a result of the impact of COVID-19. Our equality work this year has had to be flexible, responding to emerging challenges, particularly around access to information, education, and addressing race-based hate crime. The impacts of the UK leaving the EU have been deeply felt by our EU migrant communities this year, and our focus on supporting people to remain in Newport and protect their rights and entitlements has continued. We've also taken stock of the effectiveness of our monitoring arrangements throughout the year and have taken steps to improve them. As an authority, we've signed up to Race Council Cymru's Zero Tolerance to Racism policy for Wales, and also to Victim Support's Hate Crime Charter, and there's some excellent ongoing community engagement around that this week, which I'd encourage everybody to become involved with. As the leader, I've established a Black, Asian and Ethnic Minority Community Roundtable, which meets on a quarterly basis. We've recognised and promoted significant events across the city, including within our schools. And we've established themed delivery groups to deliver against the equality objective. We've reviewed the terms of reference and the membership of our Strategic Equalities Group, and that group now receives quarterly progress awards. Responsibilities under the socio-economic duty have also been embedded within council processes, and that includes embedding them within our strategic decision-making processes as well. We've got a diversity staff network, all of which are now represented at our Strategic Equalities Group. And I am so very proud, colleagues, to highlight the excellent work that has been done in terms of the distribution of funding to groups across our communities in Newport. This was overseen by the Fairness Commission, and the work has been absolutely outstanding. So there's a lot of very positive work to highlight, and there's certainly a lot of great ongoing work there as well. So at this point, I'll just pause and I'll invite the Cabinet Member, Councillor Mayor, to come in with any comments that you may have. Councillor Mayor. You're on mute, Dave.
Sorry, it's a bit sticky, that button. Thank you, Leader, and thanks for all that you said. Can I also thank you for all the, given all the work that you've done on equalities in Newport over the years? What a pleasure it is to have you as equalities spokesman at the WLGA. And can I also thank you on behalf of our staff here at Newport? We're also very grateful for your consistent support of their work. This report is a summary of the work that has been undertaken during the first year of the Strategic Equality Plan. It sets out the Council's commitment to a workplace culture and approach to service delivery that values inclusion and diversity. We will continue to progress this over the next 12 months, and the annual report sets out clear priorities for the next period based on a review of our workforce data and progress against our equality objectives to date. Work this year has been delivered against a very challenging backdrop, but this has resulted in an acute focus on inequalities and scrutiny of public services. The work we carried out in support of minority communities is a key strength in this period. The increased engagement of key stakeholders, as you mentioned, including both our grassroots communities and minorities, has been most rewarding. This has not only informed the Council's response to COVID-19, but is also its priorities during the recovery and the wider equalities work. The Council's Strategic Equality Group has also been refreshed, as you also mentioned, highlighted, and now receive quarterly highlight reports and is attended by elected member champions and network chairs, and is notably more outcome focused in its approach in supporting this work. Thank you very much, Leader.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Mayor, and I'd like to place on record my formal thanks to you in the leadership that you've shown in this particular area. I really feel that this is a particular area of activity that as an authority we are starting to make really, really good progress with. There's still much work to be done, but I'm really pleased with the progress that we're making so far on this. So thank you. Councillor Davis.
Thank you. Leader, I'd like to reiterate those thanks very specifically, and I show an element of bias here because I delivered on ensuring this was implemented across the authority as is a piece of legislation. It is a statutory piece of legislation, and that's our response and our adherence to the social economic duty. I need to thank officers for work they've undertaken to ensure this is embedded within the governance of local authority, and it's a vital piece of legislation that actually enhances and enables us to focus on equality within our administration and equality across our city, because it ensures that every piece of policy that we deliver, we need to consider it's about positive reinforcement and support for those who are most economically disadvantaged, those individuals who live in poverty, those individuals who come from a diversity of background who don't normally get those opportunities. So it's an intrinsic piece of legislation that I entirely welcome, and it is fantastic to see the work that our officers have undertaken to ensure that not only as councillors we've had training, but that training has gone across our authority to ensure it's embedded. So thank you for that, and it's a great piece of work that's within this document. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Davis, and thank you for the significant contribution that you've made to developing that. It's much appreciated. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Leader. Well, this morning I attended the Wales Strategic Migration Partnership meeting, where the work of the local authorities was recognised, and the work being done in Wales and indeed our major cities, including Newport, was being recognised by the Home Office and internationally. I'd like to sort of note as well the FEIA comments that as a direct impact of the council, there will likely be a positive impact on the areas in Newport with higher minority ethnic population. And that's evidence really that council work is actually having a positive impact in our communities. So on a personal level, I'm sure shared by all my colleagues, I'm very proud that Newport and Wales are seen as a sanctuary and a welcoming place for people moving into our city.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Hughes, and I'm very conscious that your portfolio covers some activity within that, and thank you for the contribution that you're making. Are there any further comments on that particular report? Oh, Councillor Cochrane. You're on mute, Paul.
I totally agree with what everybody is saying. There's one thing that I just like to make a observation, and it's where it says the complaints and customer service. We're not very good at adding in there compliments, and there must be lots of compliments that people are saying when they're phoning up, and we don't seem to record that very well. And I would just like to say in future maybe that we should be looking at compliments as well as complaints.
Thank you for that, Councillor Cochrane. And you're right. We need to maybe perhaps put a little more focus on what's strong than what's wrong. So thank you for that. So colleagues, in that context then, thank you very much for your contributions. Are you all content to approve the attached report and for it to progress onwards to full council? Yeah.
So move, Leader. Yeah.
Second. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much for that. That was great. We'll move to item 7 then on our report today, which is the COVID-19 response and recovery update. And this is on pages 133 to 148 of our packs. It's just very, it's very sad, isn't it, that in October 2021, this is still being reported to us. And I think that's an indication of the seriousness of the situation that we find ourselves in with the pandemic. So we chose very early on as a cabinet to ensure that we receive a regular update on the council's and our partners' response to the COVID-19 crisis in order to ensure that the city, residents, our businesses were supported, not just to comply with restrictions, but also to receive this report in order to understand what impact this was having on our corporate plan and our objectives there. And since the last cabinet meeting in September, case rates for Newport and other areas in Wales remain high as restrictions have been eased, allowing more people to socialise more and undertake more routine activities. Within this, colleagues, I think it's really important that we must remember that it remains important for people to continue to adhere to the Welsh Government guidelines, wearing face coverings, maintaining social distancing where possible, and being aware of people, whether that's friends or family, that are still vulnerable people who are susceptible to the virus, and ensuring that we do everything that we can to follow these actions that help to keep everybody safe. Now, as we all know, that hospitals in Newport and Gwent are continuing to see people being treated for COVID. And whilst the numbers are not as high as those experienced during the last winter, they remain significant enough to have an impact on NHS services. And I think it's important at this point to really reiterate the Welsh Government's position in that additional restrictions could be reimposed if the NHS and new variants of concern emerge. So it's very sobering, and we do have to be mindful of that as we move forward. Now, as you'll be aware, the programme, the booster programme is well underway, and for people over 50, they're being offered the booster as well as the seasonal flu jab. Vaccination has also been extended to 12 to 15-year-olds. And what I would say to you, colleagues, and I'm sure we'd all agree on this, is it remains really important for people to take up these offers. However, within this, we know that communities are also facing wider economic impacts as the economy has been recovering from both COVID and Brexit. And as highlighted in the Brexit report, which we'll go on to discuss, this winter period will see increasing household costs due to food and energy prices increasing, as well as there being supply issues. These impacts, as we are aware, will impact on many of our low-income households in Newport, and which in turn will place further demand on council and third sector support. So, and we've mobilised and we've worked together to support our households who are on low incomes, our more vulnerable households. We've mobilised to support them. However, in the face of the absolutely appalling decision by UK government to remove the £20 increase in universal credit, we will see the impact of this deepen even further on our residents across the city. And it's deeply, deeply distressing to be aware of that. As a council, we continue with our frontline services, and I think it's important to highlight here that the council feels the impact of this as well, and we are feeling the pressure, particularly in areas such as city services and social services. Nonetheless, we continue to deliver these services to our residents, and this is really important. We are doing all that we can to ensure that our residents are supported. Our officers, wherever possible, still follow Welsh Government guidance and are working at home. This equally, and I think this is quite important to emphasise, this working from home applies equally to our officers as it does to members. So everybody is still working. We're just working in a way that aims to keep people safe. And that's really important to emphasise. We've been finalising the technology requirements, and that will enable us moving forward to participate in hybrid meetings, which of course will enable us to work safely and keep people safe. And we'll be receiving a report on that to Cabinet in November. Now, we know that schools returned in September, and we have seen a fluctuation in attendance across all of our schools as a response to this, as we've seen people contract the virus, and we've seen isolation as a result of that. There are also concerns, and I think it's important again to highlight this, and I'm sure the Cabinet member will want to comment on this. Also concerns about parents choosing not to send their children to school because they're worried about COVID-19. So there, either directly or indirectly, COVID-19 is still having a significant impact on our residents and also impacting on our services. Now, we also recently launched significantly increased business fund in order to support new businesses, in the recognition that as furlough ends, there may be people looking to undertake, perhaps rather than seeking employment elsewhere, looking to start their own businesses and develop their own schemes, and we're keen to support them to do that. Our regulatory teams, as Councillor Truman has said earlier, have been absolutely outstanding. Not only have they developed the TTP service, but they've still continued with their statutory roles as well. And they've worked well within that. So they continue to ensure that business premises as complying with COVID restrictions and trade-in standards continue to deliver enforcement work to ensure that businesses are not delivering underage sales. We're also making preparations to launch our next participatory budget to community groups to support the COVID recovery of the city. There's a lot of positive work going on in terms of trying to address the impacts of the pandemic. Nonetheless, colleagues, as I'm sure that we're all very much aware, we are still within the grip of this terrible, terrible global pandemic. And I think it's important within this that as a cabinet, we reiterate the importance of adhering to the Welsh Government guidance and that we encourage people from all communities across our city to take up the vaccine. So, and at that point, colleagues, I think I'll just open for comments. So, Councillor Davis, would you like to come in?
Thank you, Leader. Obviously, I'm going to focus on education. Since the return of schools, we did see a rise in numbers, which is clearly of concern, and consequently we moved to an amber level, which means that we focusing on schools and support we can offer to schools to ensure that children can stay safe. Measures have been sustained in place to bring back the staggered start times, staggered finish times, staggered breaks, the movement in the corridors being one way, students still sitting facing in one direction to focus on that risk of prevention of disease, masks being worn in corridors. I am delighted that we have got a vaccination programme now in place for our 12 to 15 years of age, and I really do urge parents and young people to take up that programme, and that's currently on offer, and I know that young people are being offered those appointments. It's vital that those appointments are taken up, because we will then see a drop in numbers within schools, and we'll see that reduction rates and children can get on with learning. Attendance is being closely monitored. Currently, I'm having twice weekly briefings from my officers to ensure I'm fully cognizant of issues in relation to infection and also attendance levels within schools. The leader is quite correct. There is a high level of anxiety amongst parents in relation to COVID. But with the introduction of the vaccine, that anxiety should reduce. Our EWO officers are now working closely with our schools to focus on that attendance and to try and work with those parents specifically where there is anxiety, and also for other issues where parents aren't choosing to send their children to school at the moment, to encourage those children back into school. And those numbers and those figures within each year group, within each school, is going to be closely monitored over the coming year, because we cannot have attendance falling because of non-COVID reasons, because that impacts on our students' education, their opportunities in life, and that's something that we're really aware of. Our students need the best opportunities, and that will only happen when they're actually in school and they are learning. So really, that's ongoing work for me as a cabinet member and for my team, and I'm hoping that as we move forward the next few weeks, we'll see those numbers dropping. Thank you, Leader.
And thank you very much for that update there, Councillor Davis. Deputy Leader.
Yes, thank you, Leader. You mentioned in your address earlier about working from home and the safety of doing that. And then you also mentioned about supply issues. And I perhaps want to touch on a little bit on the frontline staff who haven't got the safety of working from home, and especially through my portfolio regarding waste and waste savers, and the poaching of HGVs that has happened all across the country. We've seen a fuel shortage, etc., and the problems go on and on. But we are not immune from that as a city council as well. And the logistical planning that goes into putting those refuse trucks and waste savers vehicles on the road every day of the week before the public even see them, it is an absolute act. And I want to thank the staff that put those plans together. Just one person that perhaps doesn't turn in, or one person has to shield, causes us issues. And obviously we have to address that, but it is a logistical nightmare every morning to carry those out. And in saying that, you know, there have been delays with waste savers, but it has been picked up the following morning or the next day. But those people we haven't missed. We still have collection of our orange lidded bin, which finishes now in a few weeks. But they were still there. They're still out collecting our refuse and waste, and I take my hat off to them, and thanks very much for that.
Thank you very much, Deputy Leader, and huge thank you to all of our operatives out there working on that. I had great pleasure to have a chat with the team in my area earlier this week, so thank you very much for that. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Leader. I often wonder how Parliament MPs sleep at night. We have got children, young children in families who've just had their £20 universal credit cut. National insurance has been hiked up. His cabinet are arguing publicly, one calling the other a liar. And where is our Prime Minister? Off on a jolly on holiday. That's not going to put food on the tables of these families who are desperately clinging onto whether I pay my rent or I feed my children. How they sleep is beyond me. The hundreds of pounds have just been added to all their energy bills. It's not 1821, it is 2021, and it feels like we've gone back to the Victorian ages for a Conservative MP to be extremely proud of a food bank. He needs to be extremely ashamed that food banks are needed. There are children out there starving in the UK, in Wales, in Newport, and where are they? All off on a jolly, on expenses, costing millions of pounds. Makes me sick. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Harvey, and you're right to point out the inequalities that we're still experiencing in Britain today. Only today a report was published on life expectancy and the differences in life expectancy in some of the more between some of the more affluent and more deprived areas in England. And the whole point that the report was making there was after a period of time when perhaps that had been reducing. In 2021, we are starting to see that gap increase. You are absolutely right, Councillor Harvey, to point out the inequalities that we have to address and we have to try and ameliorate with our service provision here in Newport. So thank you for that. Councillor Truman.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Since the last report, particularly with the Welsh Government lifting the restrictions and we've moved now to alert level 0, the environmental officers, whether it's really normally been working on clusters of COVID, are now working on schools and closed care settings because of that, because the restrictions have been taken off to alert 0. But also the enforcement staff are working closely with businesses like they usually do. They're giving advice, guidance on the retail, on licensed premises. We've got to do their own risk assessment, so they're doing that. And again, they give out an awful lot of advice to businesses, and they'll continue to do that. But as I say, and as you said, and colleagues, we're not out of the woods yet. COVID's still alive and kicking, and we got to be sensible, all of us, haven't we? And let's get rid of it. And we know which way we'll get rid of it without me having to say. We all know that. We all got a responsibility to our families and our friends and our neighbours. So let's take the advice. Let's get through this, and we'll all get through it, as you say. But we must listen to we got to be sensible and listen to the advice we're getting. And let's get through this awful time and get back to normal.
Indeed, Councillor Truman, indeed, it's really important, I think, of you to emphasise that. So thank you for that. Are there any further comments on this particular report? Councillor Cochrane.
Yeah, just one quick point. I totally support the passion from Councillor Harvey, and I think we can all support that as well. You know, it's appalling. But the point I want to just make that I think nearly every service area is feeling the impact of COVID. There's no question about that. And I think if I told members now that across Gwent there are 540 care places in all our residential homes, because we can't allow people in there because of the COVID restrictions. And now that puts pressure clearly on hospital discharge. It puts pressure on us then, because obviously if they're leaving hospital, we've got to find domiciliary care packages. it's snowballing, and I think there's the pressure on everybody. There is a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel where some of the care homes now are sort of coming forward with different decisions that are being made by the managers. So there is some light there at the end of the tunnel, but it's having a massive effect when you think that there's 540 vacancies across Gwent in all the residential homes.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Cochrane, for highlighting the impacts that we still continue to experience across services. And I think, colleagues, all of your contributions on this particular item today indicate very strongly that it's absolutely essential that we continue to have this report as a standing item on our agenda. So, colleagues, are you content to move this report today?
Yes, move that, Lydia.
Thank you very much for that. And we'll look forward to receiving our next update in our November Cabinet. The next item then is item number 8, which is the post-Brexit update report, and this is on pages 149 to 154 of your packs. Now, this Cabinet report is an update on the post-EU transition arrangements since the UK left the EU in December 2020. And since the previous report in September, Wales and the wider UK economy has encountered several disruptions, which has impacted households and businesses across Newport. We've seen the impact that the labour market is having across different sectors, such as logistics, disrupting food and fuel supply, social care, construction, farming and hospitality. This is also now impacting on our council services, as Councillor Jevons has already highlighted, and we're also seeing some disruption to services. The cost of energy, as Councillor Harvey's mentioned, has now increased, and we'll see households on standard and prepayment tariffs see an increase in their energy costs. For low-income households in Newport, this will have a significant impact and will put further pressure on those vulnerable households. Food prices have also been increasing, as well as disruptions in supply resulting in certain foods not reaching supermarkets. But colleagues, this is also impacting on food banks across Newport and Wales. And I'd just like to pause there and go back to the point that Councillor Harvey made earlier. We are here in the 21st century, it's 2021, and we're sat here discussing food banks and people having to make a very stark choice around whether to heat or to eat in the 21st century. That is just tragic. So whilst these issues are solely attributed to the UK leaving the EU, and the impact of COVID is a significant contributor, it's becoming clearer to us all that Brexit is having an impact on businesses being able to function as effectively as they did prior to leaving. Our civil contingencies team at Newport City Council have been supporting the Council's Gold team to respond to these issues and collaborating with other local authorities as part of the wider Local Resilience Forum. Our finance teams are monitoring the situation as part of its monthly monitoring and revenue planning. It's been over 3 months now since the deadline passed for EU and EAA citizens to apply for EU settled status. In Newport, 10,990 applications have been received since this process started. 5,410 EU EAA citizens have received full settled status, while 3,620 citizens have received pre-settled status. But we are aware, colleagues, that there are still over 1,000 residents still awaiting a decision. I think all of us really completely feel for those families, individuals and families who are having to live with the uncertainty of awaiting that decision on a daily basis. And certainly, colleagues, what I would say to those citizens who are here in Newport and who are awaiting those decisions, that as a cabinet, we very strongly reiterate our support for EU and EAA citizens living and working in Newport. You all have a part to play in making Newport a great city to live and work in. And within this, I encourage anyone who is still awaiting a decision or anyone having difficulties to conclude their application to please contact the council and other organisations such as the Citizens Advice Bureau, because we can help you and we can help you with support. Please, if you are still having difficulties with this, get in touch with us. We are continuing to work with community groups on this and third sector organisations to ensure that citizens have access to the services and the support they need. And we're doing further work with Gavo to make arrangements to support further food poverty work. But I will reiterate once again, colleagues, that in the 21st century, it is absolutely tragic that we even have the words food poverty within our language. Community cohesion officers are now focusing on post-Brexit rights and making sure that EU citizens, businesses and services understand their obligations to access services. It's a very, I think the report actually makes very sober reading, actually, and at that point I think I'll pause and invite any contributions from colleagues. Would anybody like to comment?
Just to reiterate what you said, Leader, it's a disgrace. And I really am struggling to understand how being proud of a food bank is a thing. It's not. And shame on them. Children going hungry in 2021. Are you kidding me? Shame on them.
Thank you for that, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Leader. I just don't believe we've seen the half of it yet. We're entering a winter of crisis. We're entering a winter with no fuel, rising fuel costs. We're entering a city where one of our main employers continues to be the steel industry, and we're talking currently that there is not enough fuel in the supply chain to continue to ensure that the roller mills will continue on the in the steel industry in the furnaces. That may well have to come to a halt for certain times during the day, and that will inevitably impact on jobs and redundancies. And it may well be the risk is actually our steel industry may have to come to a close or shut down. And a plea went out to Boris Johnson this week. Despite being on holiday, to take urgent action. He's yet to speak on that, and it is a massive issue for us as a city. We are facing a massive winter of not just fuel poverty, food poverty, but greater unemployment as a consequence of Brexit. It's a massive, massive concern for us, unprecedented in the society. Relating to, I would say, in probably reflects also the report that was published yesterday in relation to COVID and the action of UK government or Parliament in response to the initial COVID pandemic. The same process, bury your head in the sand and it might go away. As Boris stated himself, it'll get better, don't worry, was his statements last week. It won't. Action needs to be taken.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Davis, and we all support those comments there. You've got our full support for that. Councillor Truman.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Touching on what Councillor Harvey said, basically, and it's the opening lines in A Tale of Two Cities, isn't it? It's the best of times, it was the worst of times. And as you say, straight out of Dickens's book, it's, these sort of things. And as you say, it's those that got, rich man in his castle, poor man at the gate. We're going back to those times. The clock, as Debbie suggested, is going right back. And there's people, I haven't got the figures in front of me, there's a number of people who were, even before COVID, were working and still claiming food parcels. And that was, but now there's a lot of people out of work still. We hear there's a lot of jobs, but we don't see a lot of evidence about that, but we keep hearing about it. But as you say, it's not right in this day and age, it's not. as you say, we should be having this in the report. It's, you know, it's not. We all got a right to eat. All of us got to, because we make a contribution to society, don't we? We all do that as best we can. And those who are people who are injured and ill or aging, they've done their contribution. And a lot of people now are going to be thinking about, because there could be several rises, heating rises, as they've already stated before next year. Are you going to eat or are you going to freeze to death? And it's like that, isn't it? You know, people are going to be worried about turning the lights on for too long, or shall I put my heating on? And it shouldn't be, this day and age, it shouldn't be. You know, we got to look after people, look after the vulnerable. You've got to look after people. It's not, you know, that we're doing all right. The Tory sort of philosophy and sod the rest of you. People need assistance at a time like this, and you've got to find it. And as I say, it's not right. As you say, we're going through a difficult, very difficult period now. But this winter now, as you say, people could put up with an increased level of COVID, God forbid. They're worried about a flu epidemic this year as well. And then you can't put your heating on. That's terrible. I never thought we'd see this in this day and age. But as Councillor Harvey said, it's alive and kicking, isn't it? And they ought to be ashamed themselves.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Truman. Thank you. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Leader. Well, I sit on the board of the trustees of one of Newport's food banks, and it's to be honest, one job I just wish I didn't have. You know, it's as I share my colleagues' concerns really, and just it's just shocking, and it was shocking to see what was going on through COVID as well in these food banks. You know, they were working so hard, where capacity increased, as you can imagine, with people, with more and more people falling into difficulties. What I do want to do, however, Leader, is just thank the wealth of volunteers that we have who actually contribute to those food banks. It's terrible and wrong that we've got them, but it's absolutely amazing the actual amount of support we get from the general public in Newport who work in the food banks and who actually donate to the food banks. And without them, we just couldn't do the work that we do. So I'd just like to take that opportunity to thank our volunteers throughout the city and remind them of the important work that they do. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Hughes. And you highlight something of huge importance there. And yes, I think we all agree that the situation is really, in the developed world, is quite unacceptable in the 21st century. But in our discussion, our deliberation, in focusing on what is strong rather than what is wrong, to give our thanks, our collective thanks to all of those volunteers that help enrich our communities and make people's lives better. Making that difference is so important, and we truly value that. So thank you for highlighting that. Councillor Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I'm flabbergasted actually by recent events. We don't normally actually get into politics much at Cabinet or Council. We get on with running Newport to the best that we can. But there's so much as I was expecting this government. Sorry, I've had an alert. I was expecting this government to be incompetent, but given the rules and regulations introduced by the last Labour government on how people perform in the public, I was shocked at the amount of corruption that has taken place with this government, and I hope they are brought to book. I know there are lots of cases. The Good Law Project are prosecuting them on a number of issues with the illegal awarding of COVID issues and health supplies. I'm just too shocked, thank you, Leader, to say any more. This is not how it should be.
Thank you for that, Councillor Mayor. And I think those comments actually reflect very strongly public opinion here in Wales, where there's significant support for the actions that the Welsh Government have taken to keep the population of Wales safe. So thank you for highlighting that. Deputy Leader.
Yes, thank you, Leader. And I know I've spoke a little bit today about HGV drivers, etc., etc. And excuse my voice, I've got guitar. But I've just sort of looked on the internet, and it seems as if we've only had 20 foreign lorry drivers that have been granted a temporary visa to drive those vehicles in the UK. Of the 5,500 that we're supposed to get, and 5,500 poultry workers. So, I mean, and I don't usually bang on about the politics side of it, but you know, there's a plea out there from me. We need HGV drivers to deliver this stuff, lest there will be a winter of discontent. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Deputy Leader. And you know, we are in a very, very serious situation, aren't we? And again, that's why it's so important that we continue to have this update on our agenda. Councillor Cochrane.
I don't want to repeat, I totally support what everybody was saying, but it's just a sign of the times, isn't it? Because if we go back quite a few years ago, when we were in supermarkets, there was large bins, wasn't there? And that was for pet food. It was for people with unwanted pets. And now the bins in some of the supermarkets now are for people, vulnerable people. And that just shows you how it's all changed. So it was just a point I was just thinking the other day, you know, when I went past it, seeing food for people as opposed to a couple of years ago when it was pet food, wasn't it, for Dogs Trust and things like that and the RSPCA.
And that actually is absolutely, that's very profound, isn't it? A very stark image there that you've highlighted to us all, and that really emphasises the importance of us as a cabinet continuing to receive these updates and ensure that we discuss these issues and do everything that we can within our powers to ensure that all of our services are aimed at ameliorating these issues that we face. So, Cabinet colleagues, can somebody move the report, please?
Happy to move that, Leader.
Yes, second that, Leader.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And we'll await our November update on that. The next item then, just for information, item 9 is the PSB summary of business. So you've all received the link to that for information. Item number 10. The Cabinet Work Programme is on pages 155 to 162 of your packs. Members, are you content with the work programme?
Yeah, yes, content with that, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. That reaches the end of our agenda today, so I'll draw the meeting to a close. As always, colleagues, thank you so much for your contributions and your continued efforts really in relation to all of these issues. This is very much a collaborative process, and if it wasn't for the collaboration that we engage in as a cabinet, and certainly the collaboration with officers across the authority and collaboration with our residents and volunteers, we would not be able to achieve the things that we're achieving. So thank you all for that. And with that comment, I draw the meeting to a close. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Leader.
Bye.
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 Thank you.